This vehicle is the Lion, one of the most interesting auto-loading / auto-reloading vehicles in the world of tanks, and there's a reason you want to keep an eye out for this vehicle when it comes up against you in the matchmaker. This is a devastating tank at tier 10 that can really dominate games, and there's a reason why so many of the unicums within the game really do enjoy playing this vehicle. And it is not only because it is a super strong vehicle, but because it's a ton of fun. But obviously when that comes into the game and it is a competitive tank, one of the better tier 10 auto reloaders, and in fact probably better than a lot of the actual tech tree auto reloaders. Hey, there wouldn't be a surprise that you can buy a tank that's better than the tech tree equivalent, would there? But either way, the Lion is, of course, a vehicle that is a limited edition tank. It is available to some people during the year, and of course, it was available during an assembly shop, which you could purchase and get a exclusive style that you could get with the vehicle, much like the Object 452K that we've been seeing recently. And of course, you can check out the video on that vehicle if you want to see why that operation and the assembly shop was just terrible in general. But either way, the Lion is a vehicle that is super powerful because not only does it get a auto reloader that's capable of dealing a lot of damage in a very short period of time, but because this vehicle has a few nuances to it, in that the time for the auto reloading is very weird in the way that it actually works, whereby your first shell reloads very long, your second shell reloads considerably faster, your third shell reloads somewhat faster, and then the final shell takes longer to reload. It's almost a kind of central auto reloader, if that makes sense, as opposed to having things like you have the fastest reload first, then longer and longer and longer, and of course completely different to what you would see with the longest reload first to the shortest at the end. It is a weird style of vehicle that has that opportunity to kind of learn a bit more about how to use auto reloaders. Now, obviously this vehicle has 420 damage per shot, and of course if you fire all of your shells in one clip, you have 1680 damage, and there's a reason why that is important, because a lot of the times that although you might have that clip potential, you're not going to want to actually fire all of your shells because it could significantly impact your DPM. In the setup that we've actually running on this vehicle, we have 3,786 damage per minute. We have also got pretty decent accuracy with this vehicle, 0.29. We are running vertical stabilizers with this vehicle. We are running vents for increased view range and increased reload, as well as increased shell resistance, or otherwise known as hardening. And that is just to improve the hit points so we can trade a little bit better. We can throw away a little bit more of our hit points to deal more damage throughout the game. And in those engagements at the end of the battle, we can kind of use the hit points to deal that more damage. So that's kind of how I run this vehicle. It is not necessarily the only build. You could run things with turbo to improve the speed and the overall engine power, so you can keep and maintain the top speed of this vehicle, which is amazing, by the way. Able to go 60 kilometers an hour top speed, and you're able to reverse at 13 kilometers an hour. Now that reverse speed can cause some issues because you don't want to be the one that's reversing at 13 kilometers an hour when you've got multiple opponents in front of you. So you need to be very careful when you're peaking areas in the game and not rely on having to pull back as often and just trying to stay undetected with this vehicle whilst using the view range that it does get as well. So with that being said, concealment wise it's okay. It is a fairly big medium tank, however we'll be able to spot for your team, which is nice to get some assistance. And of course if you're trying to go for your marks of excellence, then you're going to need that assistance to really boost you to the next level and make it a hell of a lot easier. When kitting out this tank, obviously if you can afford it, large repair kit, large med kit, and of course using food, which I highly recommend, never taking anything else other than food. Large repair kit definitely not needed, and you could definitely swap this one out for a small repair kit and then a small med kit just to save a bit of money. But since we're playing on the press account, we don't need to do that, so it's absolutely fine with using both of these. But of course to save a bit of money as you're grinding through this or going for your marks, you might want to take some of the lesser expensive consumables. But Either way, of course, directives, you could use the Vent Purge just for increased DPM, or you can use the dispersion of the stabilizing greasing to improve that. And of course, if you wanted to run a view range build, you could potentially do that as well. But for me, this was kind of the optimal setup. I really enjoyed playing this tank in this way. And we had some really good games, but I think it's over to the actual gameplay portion to show you how you can play this vehicle and why it is one of the more interesting tanks within World of Tanks. So let's first see how an expert in this vehicle can actually play it really well. And we've got a first game on Fisherman's Bay showcasing a really nice matchup alongside a really well played game that I think you guys will learn a ton from, especially if you want to get a glimpse of what auto reloaders can do in the game and how to kind of use them correctly. And what's slightly more interesting about the Lion compared to some of the other vehicles that you're going to have within this game that are auto reloaders is that the second and third shell in this vehicle significantly have a lower reload than the first and the last shell in the magazine, which if you were to optimally use this vehicle to be able to get DPM, you'd be using just the second and third shells rather than reloading the entire mag. Now obviously the fourth shell in the magazine is not necessarily the worst thing to actually reload, as it gives you the higher potential to clip out someone if it comes along that you can do that in the game. But of course that is really down to your own personal preference as to whether or not you want to have the most DPM or whether you want to wait that extra couple of seconds to fully reload. Now there's no obligation to actually do that other than the fact of, is the reload for that final shell worth the kind of distance or the reload for the second or third shell that you're going to be reloading essentially. So if you've got 2 seconds into the final reload, it's actually better to fire off your shell right now and then actually reload the third shell. Now obviously that is completely situational, but the top players within these vehicles will find that out and they will use it to their advantage, and so you can too, hopefully, and hopefully that will be useful for you guys wanting to play the Lion. Now in this game it's been quite a passive playstyle, and that's exactly what you want to do in the Lion. You want to be able to essentially find opponents for free at the beginning of games so that you can use your single shot ability for decent DPM and kind of a scan for enemies throughout the entire game. And then in the later stages, what you can do with the Lion is fully reload every single one of your clips to then go in afterwards and start really dealing the damage all in one go, and you know, you can clip out people, which is one of the specialities of having an auto reloader, funnily enough. So with that in the kind of overview done and how you can actually use the statistics, let's actually delve into what this guy is doing within the gameplay. So what makes this game really interesting is that there are a variety of different tanks featured all across the map, and although this is not necessarily the most typical game that you're going to see on Fisherman's Bay, whereby not actually very many people have gone to the northwestern side of the map and camping in the bushes, which, let's be real, we're playing World of Tanks and we know that 90% of people go and YOLO into the bushes at the back and stay there for the entire game. This game actually has some decent deployment from the teams, which can't be said for most people, so I'll be interested to see whether your games look anything like this in the comments, as I'm sure they probably don't for the most part on this map. But either way, you're seeing here him just being very careful as to what he's doing and making sure that he doesn't kind of overpeak people. Yes, you can take a few shots, that's the downside of playing in a position like this, but obviously in doing the damage that he's done, 5,500 damage so far, you do have to take a few risks, and you're going to take damage every now and again. You just have to try and mitigate how much damage you're taking by being quite aware of where the tanks on the enemy team are. And that's exactly what he's done. There's a Shaft U-turn behind him. He knew as soon as he got hit by the TVP earlier that he had to pull all the way back. And that's kind of what he's been doing. And in between kind of the first and second shells, he's kind of waiting a little bit, just testing the waters to see, if he gets spotted, and making sure that if he does, he can pull back really quickly. He's not over peaking a corner, it's not going round the corner. And when you're on this hill, if you go round this bush, there is some potential to actually get spotted in some really weird positions where maybe you wouldn't think that you would get spotted, but that's kind of how the bushes work here. I'm not entirely sure that they are fully working as they probably should, and certainly if you go in between the bushes somewhere here, you can actually get spotted through them, which, yeah, I'm sure there's like a pixel or something where people can actually spot you through, but it happens and it is super annoying when it does. But either way, he's now feeling a lot more confident. He knows that the Cobra and the AMX were spotted, so there's no one on the opposite side to really poke out and deal damage to him. So it's free damage if anyone gets spotted where the FV is, as long as, you know, they're not looking at him. And when you have an FV looking at you and you're playing in the Lion, you're probably gonna end up crapping your pants. So you definitely don't want that happening. So just being very fluid in how you can approach the game is going to make it much easier for you to kind of play an auto reloader like this. So with that being said, we'll kind of wait a little bit and I'll join you back in a second when a bit more action happens and we can kind of give you some more tips on how to play the Lion in general. Now, what you can't afford to do in the Lion in general is to stay in one spot for too long. I mean, that is basically World of Tanks in a nutshell, to be honest. Is often people will get limited in their games because they stay in a spot that may have worked in the beginning, but they really struggle to get that further damage to push them into the high kind of single digits of thousands of damage, you know, looking at 8,000, 9,000, you know, upwards of 10,000. That's really where the positioning becomes the most important thing in the game. Forget gun skill, forget all of the kind of ability to kind of hit cupolas, that sort of stuff, and learning all of the weak points. It won't help you when you've already mastered them. You really have to rely on your positioning, which is what this guy's been doing. He's been constantly moving to different spots throughout the mid and late game of this game and replay, and that's allowed him to pick up a couple of shots here and there where, you know, you can certainly deal a lot more damage, and hopefully you guys can at least see that, and that even if you pick up only a couple more shells, if he'd stayed where he was, there's really no way of him being able to easily get damage, and he can find this little tiny pixel of the Cobra, and unfortunately for the Cobra, I don't think he realised, and it's goodbye to Mr. Cobra. Not that we'd miss him, because we all know what the Cobra's like, and at the earliest chance he'd probably YOLO round and try and clip him out. So with him out of the game, it means that he's now a little bit safer from the kind of one shot or one clippable potential that happens within this game. Now, he's found himself a Jaeger, he puts one in, and the Jaeger is overcommitted here. There's no way he can pull back at this point without, you know, being able to get a shot off or basically removing himself from the situation. So that's a nice little move there, allowing him to get an additional bit of damage. And at this point in your games, when there's only a few vehicles left, when the hit point advantage is definitely in the favour of your team, this is where you really need to start going forward and trying to get that extra bit of damage, especially if you're going for your marks of excellence, because without that, you are going to end up missing out on 1,000, maybe even more. And certainly with the Lion, because of that auto reloader and because it gets 420 alpha as opposed to a lot of the medium tanks at this tier having, you know, 390 and stuff like that, that the clip potential of this thing's really good. So in the late game, you can YOLO people, and although that might seem kind of counterintuitive, you don't really want to YOLO anyone within World of Tanks, but trust me, when you're only taking one shot, you know, you don't want to YOLO an FE 4005 when you've got not enough hit points to actually take one. But if there's no one else that can really hit you, or you know that you've got quite a bit of hit points to kind of avoid taking any damage, then that's exactly what you should be doing. He gets spotted here, but he goes for the damage anyway, and ooh, is the FV going to manage to pop a shot into him? Apparently not. And so the Gorilla 15's pushed up, he's found the FV, and their team are kind of playing quite passively. There's a lot of people on the ridges, not really wanting to push forward, and he finds himself the FV. Not a lot of damage left on him, but he picks him up, and now it's just a Leopard PTA. However, the Leopard PTA does have the alpha to actually finish him off, but it's not enough because he gets spotted and shut down by the Lion player with the lovely skin as well to make it even better that this one is in the game. So Hopefully that gives you an indication as to the Lion, how you can play these auto reloaders, and hopefully you enjoyed this very short and kind of overview of the Lion itself. So if you see one in the game, you know what to expect and how you can potentially take it out in the game. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe to the channel and check out some more videos that we've got lots of on the channel already. I'll see you there. Goodbye.